Well, good afternoon, everybody, from here in rainy Miami. It is Friday, June 2nd. I am Dave Weisberger, the CEO of CoinRoutes, and it's time for our weekly This Week in Crypto Roundup. So first, we'll talk about the very boring markets, where every market on the planet is heaving a sigh of relief that both political parties in the United States stopped acting like children, came together, and compromised. Now, was one side more childlike than the other? Yeah, you can make an argument, but let's not split hairs. The fact of the matter is, both parties ended up a little bit unhappy. Both parties are finding ways to claim victory. We ended up with a compromise solution because at the end of the day, both parties believe that the US can spend its way into oblivion. One less than the other, but it hasn't really mattered over the long term. So anyway, for now, for 2 more years at least, we won't have to hear about the debt ceiling. And all we have to worry about is whether or not we can restrain spending and keep the Federal Reserve from printing money, which is not something I think likely to happen. But in any case, risk assets have breathed their sigh of relief. So NASDAQ and Ethereum are both up around 4% for the week. Bitcoin's up about 1% as of the time that we're doing this. And to be honest, Bitcoin has been in a range, and even Ether has been kind of range bound to the point where 27,000 in Bitcoin and the 1,800 to 1,900 range in Ethereum feels like an old home, right? It's been where it's been. But the flip side to that is that the market itself is really changing from weak hands to strong, and it's been doing so for a long time. Actually, if you look at the metrics online, that we are almost at an all-time high in terms of number of addresses where 1 year or more have been inactive. At the same time, long-term holders continues to go up. At the same time, the Bitcoin network hash rate is at an all-time high. So if you bring this together, what have we seen? We've seen speculative rallies that have been sold, and all the time, on an average basis, long-term buyers have been consuming it. Volumes, on the other hand, are lower because people are not getting sucked into the head fakes anymore. There hasn't been a catalyst. So we look at a boring market, but boring sometimes isn't that bad. Compared to what was happening this time last year, I will certainly take it. We'll take the win. Now let's talk about the news events. And the interesting thing when you look at the news this week is there's really two stories that have come out that are fascinating. And both create a juxtaposition. The first is the sheer idiocy, the sheer desperation of Senator Elizabeth Warren's attacks with her anti-crypto army. Now, I could go on a long-winded rant about how dumb it was, but let's just consider what she said. She essentially cited some statistics that said that precursor chemical sellers in China, precursors of fentanyl, don't mind and are willing to accept crypto payments. Okay, cool. They're also willing to accept payments in cash. And as we all know, drugs are more bought in cash than anything else. Certainly, the last study of dollars, or actually of $100 bills, showed 90% had traces of cocaine. So we know that the drugs themselves are mostly bought by cash, not by crypto. We also know that a lot of the chemical precursors are actually fully legal. So it doesn't matter. They probably take credit cards, hell, ACHs from personal bank accounts. It doesn't matter. Where is the chemicals, the fentanyl, produced? Well, it's produced mostly in Mexico. And Elizabeth Warren happens to be part of the policy agenda of this administration, which has left the border open. So them complaining about fentanyl and pointing to crypto is the height of idiocy. But it's even more idiotic when you consider that I've not once but twice listened to investigators of the FBI tell me they are happier when the bad guys use crypto, especially Bitcoin, because when they do, it's traceable. And so if you're trying to put a case against one of these manufacturers for creating fentanyl, or at least being available to create fentanyl, the FBI can use Bitcoin where they can't if it's cash. So essentially, this argument speaks to me of desperation. Liz is essentially, she doesn't like the fact that the market seemed to have rallied and stayed here. She doesn't like the fact that the network is growing. She is afraid for what it could do to her allies in the banking system, which she uses as a political target, but takes donations from. So essentially, we have this crazy story. Now, if you juxtapose that against the other news story from this week, it is China allowing Hong Kong to have a regulated environment for people to buy or sell Bitcoin, Ethereum, and 10 other coins, I think. And that's just starting. In fact, China seems very clear that they want to promote blockchain technology, and they have changed their stance to not necessarily be against crypto, at least for the rich people and for the people in Hong Kong, to give them an outlet to be able to buy this stuff. Why might they be doing so? Well, it may very well be because of the following. Most people believe that the financial system is going to undergo a digital transformation. Just like the physical system, where we've seen supply chains completely changed by the information economy and the internet, we've seen the way shopping is done completely changed by Amazon and the internet. And we allowed this to happen despite the internet bubble. So essentially, we were deregulatory in the 90s. The internet bubble happened, which was monstrously larger than anything that's ever happened in crypto in terms of net effect on assets worldwide. Yet after that, we didn't change that deregulatory stance, and we let American companies innovate. And that innovation has driven the GDP of America to all-time highs. That has actually been responsible for hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of American jobs. But now we look at the financial markets. In the analog financial markets, the United States capital markets are number one. We are the most efficient. We have the most investability. It is easier for entrepreneurs to raise money here. What happens when the market goes digital and the rest of the world goes digital? Europe is going in that way. China is going that way. The rest of the world is going that way. And we stay analog because of Elizabeth Warren and her friends. Well, I'll tell you what the answer is. We will fall behind. And those hundreds of thousands or millions of jobs will vaporize. At a bare minimum, U.S. companies and U.S. asset managers will no longer have a competitive advantage. That is a very scary thought. But there was one piece of good news that came out just as I was about to push the record button. It sounds like the House Republicans have introduced a comprehensive bill for regulating digital assets. I will digest and talk about it more next week because I think it will be newsworthy and will get a lot of press. But the highlight that I saw is it institutes from enforcement a safe harbor for the exchanges and businesses in the United States as these things are being worked out. It chooses to leverage the SEC and to ask them to create rules that will work for digital assets and digital securities. And it chooses to leverage the CFTC, giving them authority over digital commodities. But most importantly, it says to the SEC, you have to allow platforms such as alternative trading systems under the SEC to also trade commodities, and therefore closing that massive gap that we have. As I talked about last week, there are people who claim that the SEC is okay for this because you can have an alternative trading system for digital securities. But that doesn't help you if you can't trade those securities against stable coins, which are clearly commodities, or Bitcoin, which is clearly commodities. This bill seemingly addresses that. Now, obviously, there is a long way to get from a Republican-led bill in the House of Representatives to getting past this, much less this administration. But at least it's a start. At least there are advocates on Capitol Hill that get the joke. So maybe all is not lost. Maybe we won't be ceding the financial future, the capital markets of the future to China and to Europe. But we'll have to wait and see. In any case, the markets are stable. We have a debt ceiling impasse resolved. Nobody is talking about anything horrible. We get to wait for the Federal Reserve. And we'll see if later this year, if the pundits are right that we're going to have a recession and another stock market crash. But we'll talk about that far more in depth as we get closer to that. For now, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy hopefully better weather where you are. And stay safe out there.